Okay. Let's get started. Welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time tonight to attend our town hall. Really appreciate that. Before we get started, want to recognize that we stand on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Tonight, we will be sharing our season program and how we will deliver it based on what we know today. Our plans are fluid, and patience and flexibility will be the order of the day as COVID-19 continues to impact our world. In order to provide hockey programming, we must follow the directives from our governing bodies, Hockey Canada, BC Hockey, Pacific Coast, as well as the requirements laid out by viaSport, the provincial health officer, and our facilities. Finding a pathway to get kids back to sport safely has been no small task and has included unprecedented collaboration within our communities and many hours and many Zoom conferences. Although aspects will look somewhat different from last year, we are excited to share the plans and safely get our players back to hockey. With that, Tanya, I'm going to give it over to you to take us through what the plans are.
Awesome. Thank you, Chantel. And I am incredibly excited to actually be doing this town hall with some actual information talking about actual hockey stuff. This last week has been probably the most exciting week of the last 3 months for me. So it's great to be able to get a chance to share everything that has happened. Things are happening every hour, every minute, really. So I think already by the time that we finish tonight, there's going to be new information that we could actually update you on. So we're going to continue to update you over the next little while, but really this slide says it all. It's ready, set, go, because we are on the ice in less than 2 weeks, which is awesome. So 3 things, if you walk away from tonight and you just want to remember these are the big ones. So the first one is that a safe pathway has been found to get hockey back on the ice this season. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of people much smarter than I, a lot of doctors, a lot of the provincial health officer, viaSport, all of these people have been working tirelessly to get to this point. And safety of our TBirds that's going to be the primary focus this season. Hockey's there, of course, making sure that everybody has a great experiences there, but safety is going to come down to every single decision that's made. And so that's going to be something that we're going to be talking about all season long, and everybody's going to play a part in. Things are going to be a little bit different. I think there's going to be a lot more things that are more normal than what perhaps we thought they would be even a month ago, but not everything is going to be like it always has been, and we need to be ready for that. But I'm already claiming the biggest win of the season is that we actually are going to have players on the ice in September. So that's an outstanding thing that we're achieving there. And we will follow the guidelines from viaSport and our hockey governing bodies, just like Chantal has said, but we also need everybody to play along with that as well. We know that not everybody's going to understand why a rule's there. You may not agree with it, but the fact is that we're not the ones making the rules this year, but we are the ones that have to abide by them. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through a couple things quickly around. We told you about what we were waiting for in order for us to be able to put our season plan together. We now have some of that. So the last town hall, we talked a little bit about viaSport. So viaSport is the organization that the BC government has tasked with finding a way back for sport. And so we had been operating in what was their phase 2, which was physical distancing on the ice. In fact, physical distancing everywhere, no gameplay, things like that. So what's happened is this week, they've actually announced that they're moving to their next phase, which is phase 3. And this is all about how we can play games and how we can have competition back into sport. And so you're going to hear the word cohort. You've heard it about, everybody's reading the school stuff. It's also found its way into sport as well. And so that's what's been announced this week from viaSport. And so we're going to be working with them over the next few days to make sure that we have everything ready to go for when it's ready for us to be able to actually get into gameplay. So things that have changed in here, the fact that when we're on the ice, there can be a little bit of contact. Group sizes might start going up a little bit more than what we've seen over the summer. The cohort model that's going to be introduced that we'll talk about in a minute here. Regional competitions and cohorts are going to be allowed. So that's our Pacific Coast League. So that's paving the way to be able to have league play. And then limited travel. And when they say limited, they mean limited. It means that there's nothing outside of BC. And even within BC, they're asking people to stay close to home. Now, obviously, when we go into a new phase, the first question is, when are we going to the next phase? Well, likely we're not going to get to phase 4 this year. So it'd be great if we do. And if we do, we're all going to have a parade because we'll be allowed to at that point in time. Hopefully it'll be for you Canucks fans, maybe a joint one. But at this point in time, honestly, we're not even going to look at that. We're going to focus on what we can actually do. Okay. August 13th, Pacific Coast put out their return to play plan. So that was the other piece of information we were waiting for. Again, for them, safety first. They've formed a risk and safety committee that has been putting together a lot of information, and there is going to be a risk manager meeting next Wednesday. We are in a great shape in the sense that we not only have one risk manager this year, but we actually have 2 that have stepped forward to help us through the start of the season and all the way through this season. So Nancy Liss and Kevin Hunter are going to come in and help us with getting everything in place there. So thanks to them. We are going to have a TBirds training meeting next Thursday. All of our coaches and probably team managers, HCSPs, you're all going to get an invitation. So save the date for next Thursday evening. And that's where they're going to share everything that Pacific Coast is going to provide us next week. As well, every MHA, we are required to work with every facility. And as you know, we actually do visit a number of buildings. So every single one of those has a specific safety plan that we have to then turn into a safety plan for ourselves. So we will be posting those onto our website when they're ready to go. And we're going to be continuing to work the facilities because they are living and breathing documents. One day you might be entering one door, they might find that they need to have something else happen the next week. So we're going to keep you updated on all of that as well. And parents, you are going to need to be aware of it. We're going to try and make it as simple as possible. Try and find a spot on the website that you can just click on a one-page sheet to let you know what's going on. But team managers are going to play a big role here as well, and our division ambassadors. Things to expect. So risk managers and HCSPs, it's not going to be really a big different role this year. We don't want you coming into the season thinking that everything's on your shoulders. Really, you're just going to have to be a little bit more aware of making sure that certain things do happen. And you're going to have the support of your coaches and team managers, especially at the beginning, because some buildings, it's not even the HCSP that's allowed in. So we are going to have to work together as a group and figure this out as we go forward. Things that we're already doing, sharing water bottles or equipment, handshakes. These are all things that are nothing new, and we're just going to continue that. Stay at home when you're sick. This is going to be, I think, for the next few months. It's been the same for the last few months. Again, nothing new. Maintain physical distancing as much as possible. Obviously, when we're playing the game, we can't, it's going to be part of it. That's why they're introducing what they're doing in order for the cohorts to work. However, when you're not having to be out there, then keep that in mind. And then wearing masks is recommended by the Provincial Health Office. Our venues are also putting some restrictions in place as well. We will have to follow those, okay? They have set up in the Pacific Coast a series of timelines for decisions throughout the season. So it's not, they haven't come up with a plan and said, okay, August 13th, we're deciding what's happening throughout the entire season. What they've come up with is okay, our next time that we're going to check in is X date. So September 30th is the next big date that's coming up. They're going to take it in blocks. They're going to look at all the information that's available and come up with a really good decision based on the information at the time. And they, of course, are going to adhere to the viaSport guidelines for a few reasons. The top one is that our Hockey Canada insurance, in order to be compliant with it, is we have to follow the provincial guidelines. So that's the viaSport guidelines. So we have to do it. Pacific Coast also wanted to provide consistency between the minor hockey associations within the Lower Mainland. And they don't want to be able to have this be, an uneven playing field for different groups just because they happen to have more access to ice or things like that. And final thing is that they want something there that's going to keep us all reminding ourselves that it's about safety. that we tend to potentially get a little carried away on the competition side sometimes. That's not what it's about this year. And these viaSport guidelines are going to keep us in check. Okay. So Pacific Coast Return to Play, they had a committee that got together. Like everything else, there's 4 phases. Why break the mold? We're going to go into this a little bit more in detail when we go through our plan, but this is where we built our plan from. And you'll notice that the arrow goes both ways, because at any point in time in the season, we can go forward, we may have to take a step back. So it's built out to be able to accommodate that. So our plan within TBirds, it's, like I said, it's information based on what we know right now, and we are ready to adapt, whether it's for moving things forward, staying where we are, maybe taking a step back with whatever comes our way. We are going to adhere to all the guidelines like everybody else. We have to at this point in time. viaSport on Pacific Coast, BC Hockey, Hockey Canada, all of those come into play. But it also includes our venues. And our venues right now, for the most part, the ones that we're going to be dealing with have not been online all summer long. So they are at the beginning stages of getting comfortable. And so we need to help them make sure that they know that we are their partner and we're going to get through this together. And if there is a pause or a stoppage, we're going to adjust. We'll make it through and figure out what needs to happen at that point in time, and communication will continue to come out to our membership. So where we're going to start with, and this is the first phase from Pacific Coast, it's the level 1 development. So this is all about skill development. The beginning of the season, it's going to be physically distant skill practices so that we can actually move players throughout groups. The whole purpose of the first few skates is to make sure that we have players where they should be for either for the U6 to U8 and U9 group initially, and then U6 and 7 when they come online. We want to be able to get them into the right skill group sometime in a couple weeks. For our recreational, we want to get them set up for the balancing process. And for the rep tryout kids, we want them to be able to be starting in the right tryout group. So that's what it's going to be for the first 3-4 sessions for everybody. And then below what we've got here is what's called the best case timeline. So as I talked about, Pacific Coast is going to have set dates for timelines for decisions. That's what's going to happen. So U6, they're going to be in development all year. That's what they do all year. U6, Hockey 1, we'll have to remember, get used to all the new language. I'm a little bit more used to it than what I'm sure you are, so I'll try and bring that back. So U6, they don't go out and play games. U7, they generally don't start playing games until after Christmas. So we don't expect that to be a change this year. For our Hockey 3, Hockey 4, the U8 and U9s, they don't start playing games till December, but they start getting into teams starting sometime in November. So again, their decision from Pacific Coast on October 26th, they're going to say whether or not they can start that gameplay at that normal time as of December 1st. The U11 to U18, so Atom to Midget, they're looking at, from Pacific Coast, being able to start league play after Thanksgiving, but they're going to make that decision on September 30th. So on each of those dates, Pacific Coast is going to be able to go and look and go, either we're going to stay where we are, we're going to continue skill development, or we may be able to go into some kind of a competition. And there's 2 different types, which we'll go over in a minute, or else we might have to stop. So that's what they're going to actually look at each of these dates and be able to pass it out to all the minor hockey associations. Balancing process for our recreational players. This is going to start a little bit later in September, and it'll go through October. Again, we're planning to be able to go into gameplay after Thanksgiving, so that's what we're targeting right now. Internal gameplay, if it's allowed, it is allowed now by viaSport. It's allowed by our hockey governing bodies. Our venues right now, we're not at the right level for numbers allowed to be able to go into a full gameplay. So we got to work with them a little bit and figure it out, but we could do 3-on-3. So we'll figure out exactly what we can do, and we will do the most that we're allowed to when it comes to that. Excuse me. Tryouts process for this is going to be determined a little bit later as well, based on what we're allowed to do in the venues. So again, It could be very similar to what we've done in the past, where it's gameplay for a few days, or it could be a modified gameplay, or it could be skills. So, or a combination of all of the above. So we'll be able to give more information a little bit later. We will be putting out a commitment form that is the same as every year. Everybody has to sign it before they get assigned to a tryout group. And just a reminder that TBirds hockey is asked to be the priority sport. And viaSport today did talk about trying to have people choose to limit some of their activities that they may always do. So we'll get a little bit more information from them tomorrow. We're on a call with them with BC Hockey, so we'll have a little bit more information there and be able to pass that along. We will, as usual, have a minimum of 3 evaluation sessions during tryouts as well. Okay. Now, if we get to that September 30th timeline for the U11 to U18 group, and Pacific Coast is going to decide whether or not they are going to start after Thanksgiving with either a competition with restrictions, which means that it's not a normal gameplay. It means that it could be a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4, or it may be restricted to, we can only play Vancouver and Richmond area or things like that. So if that kind of a decision is made, that's going to come from either a viaSport or a health authority kind of a direction. But they are ready to put together a schedule for that. Or else they may say, you know what, we could go with the full competition. We can do 5-on-5 play, and we can put it into the Pacific Coast flights, and we will set things up. Now, what's come out from viaSport is this cohort structure, which we'll explain a little bit more in a minute, but it essentially allows us to be able to play within a flight in Pacific Coast in a similar kind of way than as we did before, just in a condensed burst kind of games for a couple weeks, break for a couple weeks, and back into games. So we'll go through that in a minute here. And then if we actually do have a meaningful season, and playoffs are something that can be considered, middle of January, Pacific Coast is going to come in and create a format that actually works within whatever's allowed. So the theme of the year is they're going to make a decision based on whatever is permitted at that time, and we're going to move forward and get it ready. So this cohort, this is directly out of the viaSport guidelines. So I'm not going to read it word for word here, but essentially what a cohort does in sport is it allows you to play in a competition. And it means that you're not going to be playing against all the teams one after another. They're going to keep it condensed so that they are able to reduce the risk of transmission. And so that's the big thing there. And cohort is basically, in hockey, it's going to be a 4-team cohort that you're allowed to play. And then you're able to do home and home games with the same teams instead of spreading out where you normally play one team the beginning of the season, again in the middle, maybe again in the end. It's going to be playing the same team back to back. And so the cohort's allowing physical contact to happen on the field of play. And so the bottom here, they do talk about the fact that when you're not on the field of play, physical distancing is going to be required. And this lovely little highlighted section is something that is a big discussion that is happening with BC Hockey and viaSport and the health authorities right now. Because as you can imagine, the team benches, we can't fit a team full of kids 6 feet apart. And so they are working on solutions and figuring out how this can be solved. As an example, in Alberta, the team benches are actually considered part of the field of play. And so it's not needed to be physical distancing. So we're working through this right now, but it is something that does impact hockey a little bit more than perhaps a field sport. So we also have to remember that viaSport is making these rules for every sport. And so sometimes there is some exceptions that are sport specific made, and it's up to the provincial sport organization, which is BC Hockey, for us to work with them to come up with that. And so those discussions are ongoing, and we might have an update tomorrow. It might take a few days, it might take a few weeks, but at the end of the day, we're really not looking at gameplay itself until after Thanksgiving. So we do have some time for them to solve this. So each cohort can be comprised of multiple teams. So what they've said in for hockey, that it's 4 teams, and it was up to the provincial sport organization to determine what the size of that team was, and if they were going to go with either a 4-team cohort or 50 people. And so what BC Hockey has done is their board has approved a 4-team cohort, that option, at the Hockey Canada regulation size rosters. So it paves the way for allowing for 5-on-5 play to happen. We just need to get there with our venues and make sure that we have everything in place to make that happen. So it is possible. And what the cohorts can do is they'll stay together, like I said, in short little bursts. So think of it really easy, and this is really simplifying it, but you'll be in a team cohort of 4 teams. You'll play each other for a 2-week period, and then you have to take 14 days before you can actually switch up who you play. So you'll play with these guys for 2 weeks. You'll take a 2-week break where you'll just be practicing with your team. And then you'll go into another cohort group where you're playing different teams and still practicing. So it's going to look a little different on the schedule, but it means that we can actually go out and play in a flight situation, just a couple teams at a time. So this is the conversation that came out of today. And so we're waiting for viaSport to kind of clarify a little bit, but it's something that we wanted to make sure that parents kind of start thinking about and figuring things out. So they are going to allow kids to play in different sports and be part of different sport cohorts. They're wanting them to consider potentially limiting how many they're in. And so that's going to be really a family decision. But it is something that everybody is going to have to consider how they want to do it. And we'll continue to try and provide some of that direction that comes through, because it's sometimes a little bit muddled behind a lot of other things. And so we're working with them to try and get a little bit more clarity on what it is that they really are recommending there. For TBirds, we are going to provide the competition cohorts, and we are working with viaSport and BC Hockey to sort out this internal training cohort opportunities. And so if we can't allow, if you're not allowed to be allowed into 2 different cohorts within hockey, then our user pay skill development will become part of what's the physically distanced phase 2 element. So we can still offer them, we can still provide that. But if we're allowed to create an internal training cohort, then we're actually going to be able to extend that a little bit more back into a little bit of battle drills and things like that. So we're working with them to figure out exactly what we're allowed to do, and we'll let you know. And then when the numbers at the venues, right now, as I said, that's right now what we're working towards, is working with our venues to get comfortable enough to be able to get up to the numbers for gameplay, as well as when we can have our normal 2 teams at the rink together. So our U6 to U9 groups, and then all of our recreational, they're usually together with 2 teams. That's going to be allowed. We just need to have a bigger buffer around center ice to be able to keep the teams from mixing. Competition. So again, phase 3 was all about how competitive activities could come in. And so it's right now, anything that we will do in September all the way up to Thanksgiving, it will be within TBirds. We're not actually allowed in the Pacific Coast Plan to play other associations up until Thanksgiving. And so once we get there, phase 3 again allows us to go out and play against different associations if it's done appropriately. And then it's up to BC Hockey to define what the regional play is. And they've come out and said that they're going to let the leagues run their own. So Pacific Coast is who we actually will be listening to on how they run the league. Interprovincial competition should not occur at this time. So there's no tournaments in Alberta. There's certainly nothing happening in the States. So I know that's something that a lot of our teams will go down and participate in a number of tournaments in the Seattle area. Guys, it's not happening this year. So we're going to look to see what we can do. If tournaments are allowed within the Lower Mainland, then we'll figure out things there. But right now, our focus is on getting to the league gameplay and making sure that that happens. And viaSport was very clear that we need to make sure we have a detailed safety plan in place. It's required. And so, as I mentioned, we are working with our venues right now to complete that. And we'll post that as soon as we have those ready to go, so that anybody that's interested is more than welcome to read through them. So our next steps, and these are honestly within the next week, because there's a whole series of next steps happening every day, but these are the big ones happening right now. Now that we have announced the season program, we have kicked off that 7-day period for players to be able to withdraw. We do hope that we see everybody at the rink, but we certainly understand that this is an unusual time, and every family has to make their own decision on what they feel comfortable with. And so you do have until Tuesday. We hope that, we hope that we don't have a number of people that are in that situation, but we certainly have made it so that next year, when things are a little bit more clear, and if you feel more comfortable to come back, you are still T-Bird first. You are still part of the family. So you will be invited to come back in and register with the returning players. So that was a big one for us. We wanted to make sure that you had that opportunity. As well, we are going to be creating all the initial groups that are going to be starting to be on the ice starting September 8th. So over the next couple of days, and we do have to wait for the 7-day period to finalize it. So we may not get those posted until towards the end of next week. So everybody should be ready to go on the rep side and on the recreational side. There will be ice times on the Tuesday. So be prepared for that for some of the teams and all throughout the week. We will be identifying all the coaches that are going to be leading those sessions. As well, we're going to be asking for a group manager and a group safety person. Those groups are going to stay the same for the first couple of weeks for the most part. So we're going to need to have somebody that's going to be the contact within each group. And we're going to work on finalizing all the safety plans to be able to get those posted and finalized. So that, in a very short nutshell, is what has been happening and where we're heading. And at the end of the day, we're going to be on the ice on September 8th, and it's going to be a little chaotic. And I apologize if it's maybe not quite as smooth as perhaps it normally is for the first day, but we're certainly working hard to get it over the finish line. We did have a few people submit some questions. So before I get into reviewing those, just a reminder that if you do have questions, feel free to just put them into the chat. Our worker bees behind the scenes there are putting them all together, and they're going to feed me some questions once I get through this. None of them are brave enough to be the true Vanna Whites and come on and ask the questions, so they're going to just have to send it to me through the chat. So make sure that if you do have questions, that you just put it over to them. So thank you to those that did put in some questions before tonight. Hopefully that's going to cover some of them, but the first one was, why are you increasing the fee now and not when you first announced them in the spring? So we did publish that we are going to be requesting a $50 fee from everybody that carries on in the season. And this is very wordy. I'm not going to read these. This is for the people that maybe aren't joining us tonight so that they can have the full understanding. But essentially, when we create the budget, it's in February and March. Some little thing happened in March, something called COVID-19. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but essentially it stopped everything. And so the board looked at everything and went, you know what, we're just going to keep things the same. We had sent out the survey. We had a number of our families that were impacted early on. So we wanted to wait for a little bit more clarity to come in. And that's what's happened over the last couple of weeks, is we've gone through and revised the budget based on real facts right now, real registration numbers, as well as the fact that in the first 2 weeks before City of Vancouver rinks come online, we are at the Richmond Olympic Oval and UBC exclusively. So there was the need to do a little bit of an increase. And what we landed on was the $50. Will there be additional programs offered this year? So again, yeah, we're absolutely planning to do it. We're just working with viaSport and BC Hockey to figure out exactly what we're allowed to do on the ice with the cohort system. And if you know, we're going to plan on running Derek's high performance program. We're going to do the Thunderbird goalie school. Still going to find recreational skill sessions as well as sessions for our U6 to U9. Those are all going to happen. We're going to have a little bit more information as we get into September on them. Big one. This was one that came from a few people. Are parents allowed in the venues? So none of our venues at this point in time are planning to let parents come in to watch the games. UBC and the Vancouver Park Board arenas will allow parents to come in to help tie skates and get the kids ready to get on the ice, but then they will have to leave the venue at this point in time. So our coaches and in some of the venues, our safety people are going to be allowed in. What we're asking is for our coaches to go and get their HCSP so that we actually do have certified safety people on site. So it's a little bit different there. I don't know how long it's going to last. I think, as I mentioned earlier, most of our venues haven't been on doing much this summer, so they're just getting their feet under them, and having more people in the building just makes that a little bit more complicated. So they're moving fairly quickly. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see that happen sooner than later. How many skill groups or teams will be formed for U8? So initially, it's all dependent upon the number of participants that are allowed in each venue. Right now, we're at a maximum of 20, including coaches. And so that will determine everything. We'll have a little bit more information. You'll see a little bit when we put the schedule out with the groups next week that'll answer division by division. But at the same time, we are working with the venues already, trying to be able to work out those stepping stones to be able to get to where we're used to being. How are the skill groups teams going to be formed? So at the beginning of this of September, all of our young groups are going to be based on the skill group that they were in last year. So U8, U9 starting the week of September 8th. The U6 and U7s, we're delaying the start until October, but it's all the same kind of process. They go in based on where they were last year. And then we have some skill instructors that are there that will actually be able to make sure that they land in a good skill group that's going to carry them through for a little while. On the recreational side, players are going to be placed into the loose balanced groups, not the teams yet, but it's a starting point to head into the balancing process using the coaches' ratings from last year. And then on the rep side, we're going to look at where the players played last year. It's the same way that we've started the last couple seasons of the tryouts, but instead of one day, it's going to be a couple weeks, and then we'll put them into the tryout groups from there. Will someone be responsible for contact tracing at each ice time? And as I said earlier, things change all the time, so this slide is already outdated a little bit. But yes, we absolutely have to track everybody that comes in. We are finding out if we have to deal with the parents that just do drop-off, because there's a bit of different information there. The bottom one is something that I really want to point out. As of this week, and it was clarified today by viaSport, not only do we have to provide a list of names and contacts if an outbreak occurs, we actually have to provide the list and names and contacts of anybody that takes part in every single session to that venue. So it's a ministerial order that the venues actually have to have the contacts. So we are going to be working on sorting out how we do that and making sure that it is keeping private information as private as possible in these days. Water bottles, labels, absolutely. Not only that, label the water bottle with your player's name, make it very clear. Make sure that your player has a mask with them, because they will have to wear them in some of the venues. We'll highly suggest that you have a small bottle of hand sanitizer and a package of tissues in their hockey bag. A lot of places aren't going to have washrooms available to go and be able to blow their nose. So make sure that they've got everything that they might need there. And this is a big one. Make sure that your player has a good set of the skate guards. the hard ones, not the soft covers, and really highly recommend that they're not the rollerblade type. Both UBC and the oval have a number of stairs, and that's not exactly the safest type of a skate guard. So make sure that they're well fit, that they're not going to fall off, because it's not necessarily all skate approved areas that they're walking through. How will too deep supervision be managed? So first thing to say is that at this point in time, there's not spending a lot of time in the venues. They're either 10 or 15 minutes before or 10 or 15 minutes after, but we will have coaches that are going to be there. In some of the venues, our safety people will be there as well. So we will have some monitoring that is happening, as well as at the city rinks and the oval. It's big open areas. It's not enclosed dressing rooms, and kids are, for the most part, coming dressed already. So it's a little bit of a different situation, but we will have oversight for sure. Can we arrive early to warm up? Like I said, you're not going to be up in the building a whole lot. So, you know, it's one of those things where if you can find a safe place around where you're parking, or if there's a park or a pathway, you can go for a jog. If you're doing it in a group, physical distancing has to be maintained, things like that. And we do need to have the too deep supervision happening on that as well if it's a group going. So we'll work with the coaches a little bit more on getting this kind of thing set up, but be prepared that this is one of the things that isn't going to be the norm. Spitting, nope. And I know that our older players especially, this is going to be something that's going to be a habit that they have to break. So it is in every contract that we receive with a bullet point saying this is something that is expressly forbidden. So we're going to have to work hard on getting that changed. Okay. Let's see if we have any other questions that have come in. I'm sure that we have. So the first one is, will the withdrawal time be later for the U6 group? At this point in time, it's not something that we've discussed. However, the board is always willing to have anybody submit something for them to consider. Right now, the withdrawal period is ending on Tuesday, September 1st. So if anybody in that U6 or U7 group is still not comfortable afterwards, I would recommend you just send me an email with your explanation a little bit, and I'm happy to bring it to the board at the next meeting. But for our planning purposes, we have set that September 1st timeline. Okay, will the withdrawal, okay. Are we still allowing graduating players to play with buddies? Yeah, we're still allowing the friend request to happen, and so you'll start to see that even right off the bat in the loose groups, because we usually try and put them together early on. And if for anybody that had submitted their request by the time that they were supposed to, those ones will definitely be honored. Anybody that tries to sneak one in now, can't really promise that that's going to happen. Okay. So for rep selection, how will you establish which groups athletes start in? So again, we're going to base it off of last year where they played and set the number based on how many participants were allowed within each group, and move from there. So it's the same as what we've done in the last couple of years with that. How will kids move up or down? So that's going to be part of the actual tryout process, and we will provide a little bit more information on that mid-September once we find out exactly what it is that we're allowed to do on the ice. That will set that kind of what the process really will be for tryouts this year. Okay, so will sessions be 60 minutes instead of the normal 75? So it depends on the venue. UBC, it's an hour and a quarter ice slots mandated all the way through. At the oval, it's going to be it's going to start with an hour, and then it'll be based on whether or not we get into gameplay or not. Typically, the practices for the most part, unless they were morning practices, were an hour long. And then game times were based on whatever Pacific Coast regulations were. So this year, one of the things that Pacific Coast is going to be looking at is they're not going to mandate that it has to be an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half. But if we have the ice, we will keep that going. At this point in time, it looks like we will have really similar hours to what we had last year. What we're just not 100% sure is how, if a venue like UBC is mandating an hour and a quarter for everybody, how that's going to potentially impact. But we have the same number of hours in our allocation as we had last year. Okay. What can we expect the rep fees will be? And so we are just finalizing our coaches for that, and we'll be able to announce the rep fees hopefully in early September. Well, it will be in early September because we're almost in early September. But essentially what we're looking at is that there's going to be a slight increase on the Atom and Pee Wee because we have secured a number of coaches for our Atom group that we normally don't. And we have secured at least one more of our Pee Wee than what we normally have for the last couple of years as well. So that will increase it by a little bit. And then on the Bantam and Midget side, we're still sorting out the dry land piece, which is going to be at the Oval this year. The skill session and the dry land will happen out there. But it will be similar to what it was last year. And we'll go from there, but we'll give all that information sometime very soon. So September 8th is a school day. Will U8 start on the weekend? Yes, it certainly will. U8s and U9s right now will be starting on that weekend, and it'll be the rep and the recreational that will start during the weekdays. How do the new restrictions affect volunteer hours? Honestly, we're going to need more volunteers this year than we've ever had. So if anything, we're going to be asking for people to exceed that 3 hours per player because we're going to need the help. When will we know ice times? So the big thing is going to be, I need to get the groups finalized, which means that we have to get through the 7-day period initially. And I'll be able to tell you what the first 2 weeks are at that point in time. We just received tonight, right before this started, our allocation from the city rinks, which will come online over a 3-week period. And so it's almost like we're going to do a 2-week, and then we'll go up to Thanksgiving, hopefully, and then we'll get into season and have things a little bit more set. Now, what my goal is that we're going to have the ability to be able to have the practices remain consistent throughout the year for all the teams. But as we talked about, the games are going to be done in kind of bursts, in short 2 to 3 week kind of time periods. And then your team's not going to have games. So other teams are going to come in and take those game slots. And so when you come back in for the next group, we're going to have to work with what the other teams that are in your cohort to make sure that there's a schedule that works. So the game times might not be consistent this year, but the practices are something that we're going to target to make sure that they are as much as humanly possible. What will be the process if our child is injured during the game? So will parent be contacted during? Will the parent be permitted in the arena? So there is absolutely an allowance in every safety plan for something like this. Whether if we have an HCSP that's allowed in the venue, they will take charge like they normally do. If they are not, then we will have, as I said, we're asking our coaches to get their certification to take on that role, but the coaches will take over there at that point in time. They will all have the ability to have the contacts. Parents will be absolutely contacted immediately. Is anything being done with UBC and the Oval? Sorry. Where are we here? To assist with parking costs. So the Oval right now is free parking. They're just switching over their parking, so they don't expect that to be paid parking anytime soon. UBC is UBC, and unfortunately, we don't have any ability to change what they do on campus. That's a question that comes every year, so at least something is normal in the questions this year. Okay. Will the Will our Butis Club be part of our cohort? So Pacific Coast is going to determine what teams are in the cohort that we play against. So as far as initially, our Butis Club is running their own program up until Thanksgiving. And then once we go into league play, then it will be up to Pacific Coast to determine what that schedule is and who is in each cohort each time. So I have lots of people that are chatting with me privately as well as sending it into the Vancouver Thunderbirds there. So I'm just trying to sort through. I'm sorry if I missed somebody. My chat's kind of going a little crazy here. What about goalies? It's pretty hard to come dressed. Can we help them? So the goalies are going to be something that it's going to depend on the venue a little bit. So again, on some of our venues, they're going to allow a parent to come in to help, to assist. In fact, I think all of them will probably have a way to help. So it might be that if you're a goalie parent, there's a good chance if you're at the Oval that you're going to want to put your hand up to be part of the helper group, so that you can actually go right up into the dressing area to help them. Otherwise, somebody else will help them. We're trying to limit the amount of contact that our coaches need to have, but we will ask them all to have masks as well. They can get dressed and walk in there as well, but it is a little bit of a walk for sure. Can goalies use dressing rooms? The only dressing rooms and venues that are going to be allowed are at UBC. And UBC has actually done a coating called Zero Blast, which is something that kills bacteria on contact. And so they are the only ones right now that are opening their dressing rooms. The city, as well as the Oval, have big open area dressing areas that are basically chairs that are 6 feet apart set up. How do we drop off younger kids? Will somebody be taking them in? So at the Oval, there is absolutely, basically at all of these, they're going to be escorted in. So that's nothing that you need to be overly concerned about. That is a reason why we're starting the U6s and U7s a little bit later, in the hopes that we will be able to have parents be able to not only come in to help them get dressed, but that they'll actually maybe be able to stay, because we know that those ages are a little bit more complicated without having mom and dad there. We certainly appreciate that. But at the same time, if we have to move forward without that, then we will make sure that we have really good systems in place, and make sure that we have parent contacts and things like that to make sure that it's as good of an environment as we possibly can for the kids. Will players be required to wear full face shields instead of cages? It is recommended, but they can't mandate that because there's not enough of a supply, and it's also it's an additional cost. So that's a personal preference. Families that would like to go that route, you can. There is, I know Bauer and CCM both have put out products that actually do have a covering. How easy that's going to be able to get is a question, but it's not mandated, and it's not something that we will require for anybody to have. Okay. What happens if one goalie team loses their goalie due to injury? It's something that is being discussed with BC Hockey. Again, we've got some time here before we're actually into gameplay. These very specific sport kind of setting things are being talked about now. viaSport just announced this move to phase 3, so we do need to give a little bit of time to be able to figure out all of the details. This is the one that I actually put in to BC Hockey tomorrow for a question, so maybe if I might even have an answer by then for you. Is there a contingency plan if the public rinks do not open, or if only some of them open? So at this point in time, they are opening. So we have 3 rinks that are opening September 21st. They have another 2 that are coming online September 28th, and the final 2 are coming on October 5th. So that is the plan. Our contingency plan kicked into gear when they told us that they weren't going to be open until September 21st. And we went and we secured ice at the Oval and UBC to be able to operate. Beyond that, we're very thankful that they were able to get the approval to open. For a while, we weren't sure if it was. And again, thank you to all those that put in a little bit of a nudge to try and get that one through the commissioners, and it worked. So thank you. Okay. How will we be able to volunteer if we can't come to the arenas? So in this, especially in the first couple of weeks, we're going to need people helping with collecting the all the contacts, doing all of that stuff, making sure that everybody's collected before they're allowed to go in as a group. We're going to need coaches on the ice. We're going to need people that are going to be helping with a number of different things in and around the rink. That it's fairly normal in our balancing process that we have different people that are helping out. It's just, instead of being inside the rink, you might just be out in the parking lot doing it. Our team manager's allowed to stay in the arena. At this point in time, it depends on the rink. So again, we're going to give detailed instructions on each of the rinks, but the Richmond Olympic Oval, they are asking for a safety person as well as somebody who is a coordinator. So that would be the team manager. UBC is its coaches only. The city rinks, we're not 100% sure yet because they're just working through all of that right now. So it's, again, everything is very, very venue specific, and it's going to start off very different. And my expectation is that they're going to come together fairly quickly into a single line of thinking. But right now, they all have to be very internally focused on what it is that their staff and what they're comfortable doing. Has Vancouver Thunderbirds been provided the same amount of ice time for rep players as previous year? At this point in time, we have the same number of hours across the board. So until I actually have a chance to sit down and dissect what we've received from the city, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be. But our plan is that it is going to be very similar as far as the number of ice times that you will get over the year. It may just be different that you have games instead of, you know, a nice round 2 a week, you might have 3 a week. And then when you go into that break, you have no games, but you still have your couple practices. So it's going to be more of an average over the year as opposed to an average over the week. Okay. Will midget players still be able to participate in the Give Back program, helping the coach the younger siblings teams? I'm certainly hopeful. At this point in time, again, once we get the venues to be comfortable and they start adding numbers to that, you know, the max 20 becomes max 30, max 40 for a game, then those kinds of things will be able to start off. Initially, it will be delayed, but we certainly have that plan to happen this year again. What about live recording of games for parents and grandparents to watch? It's a great question. So on the lovely little update that was sent out, there's a little box there asking for somebody to be able to come in and help figure that out. I hope you can appreciate that I have a little bit to do with trying to sort out the ice. I would love to be able to jump in to figure out live streaming as well. I just don't have capacity to do that. So I would love it if somebody would actually take that on, because I think it would be a great thing for parents to be able to actually still be part of it and see what is happening. And I think for the comfort level of all the parents around the safety things that are put into place, that will also go a long way as well. So I really want to put that out there, that I hope somebody is willing, maybe has a little bit of time over the next week or two to be able to help us figure that out. Okay, so we've got a couple more minutes here, so we'll keep going. Is hitting going to be allowed? So this is something that's going to be up to BC Hockey. We may find out a little bit more direction tomorrow on our call, but again, we're not quite at that point yet. But we might find out tomorrow, because now that viaSport's gone into phase 3, technically contact is allowed, and it's up to the provincial sport organization to tell us what that means. So it's not going to be up to Thunderbirds. It's not going to be up to Pacific Coast. That one's up on BC Hockey and the officiating group's shoulders for that. So we will let you know as soon as we know. Okay. So for U7, if parents are not allowed in the building, what is the process if a child needs to pee in the middle of training? This is one of those pieces why we are hoping that we can delay it a little bit and be able to get to the point where we can have parents in. I'm confident that even if we can't have all parents in, that we're going to be able to extend having the team manager and maybe a couple parent helpers to come in. Otherwise, we will certainly put in some kind of a supervision element, but all of our coaches and team staff do have criminal record checks, and we will ensure that things are done as appropriately as possible. But if it comes down to the U6 and U7s starting, in fact, U8s and U9s are really not any different, please have them go pee before they come. That would certainly be helpful. Okay, so has TBirds considered the amount of money that will be saved on referee costs due to fewer games being played factor in the decision to raise fee? So at this point in time, we actually think with the plan that Pacific Coast has, we may play the same number of games. So it's a potential, but at this point in time, we're counting on having that happen, and so we couldn't pull that piece out of the budget at this point in time. If it does, then like everything else this year, the board has been meeting weekly, bi-weekly, and going through all of this. And so if for whatever reason we get to the end of the season and we haven't used it, I'm sure that that's going to be a conversation. Okay. Do venues have any sanitizing measures in place between shift of games? Absolutely. So UBC, as I mentioned, they have a coating that they've put over their entire building. So that is part of it. They are also wiping down everything between. The Oval, we actually have a part to play in that there, where we will be the people that's why I think they're letting the HCSP and a coordinator come in. We actually have to wipe down the chairs in the dressing area that we use. They have staff that comes and does the benches and all of the areas around. At UBC, they've got full staff on city rinks. They're working through that right now, but they have an additional rink person on every shift at the city as well. So absolutely, that's part of their whole plan. And we will be working with them to help wherever we can. U6 practices were historically on Saturday, Sunday mornings. How likely will that schedule still be in October? Fairly likely, I think. I can't speak specifically until, like I said, I need to dissect all the ice that we just received. But what we try and do with the younger groups is we want to avoid the soccer on the Saturdays for the boys, and that tends to mean an earlier start time, because we actually need to have time to do games in the rest of the day for the other divisions. But we'll see exactly where we land. At this point in time, it may be a little bit, it might actually be at 8 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, but I would count on having some early mornings there still. How will we be notified if there's a case of COVID-19 within the cohort? So Hockey Canada has a very, very specific guideline that it's very similar to, if anybody's seen the return to play and the concussion elements and things like that. They've created a full spectrum for COVID. And so if there is a case that is identified, everyone in the cohort will be notified that somebody within their cohort has tested for COVID. We will not release the name. We will not go into any details, but we will shut that cohort down. And if it's only practice time, then it's within TBirds. If that team has played anybody else, then it shuts down the entire competition cohort. And it's basically a spider web at that point in time for every association to go out and notify everybody that has been part of that. And that's where that contact tracing is going to become so critical. Can TBirds prevent people from playing in HPL and TBirds, as it is a separate cohort? This is something that is going to come from BC Hockey and viaSport, and that's, I mentioned it during the presentation, that internal cohort and limiting cohorts, that was something that came up on the viaSport call today, but we're looking for a little bit more clarity on it. What they said today specifically was that it's one hockey cohort. You can do one hockey, you can do one soccer, you can do one baseball. So the question that is coming back is, well, what if they don't do a soccer? Can they do two hockeys? So we don't have that answer at this point in time. I think from a safety piece, it's something that parents are going to have to consider, because if you're in a skill development where there's physically distanced stuff happening, that's a little bit of a different situation than if there's actual full contact happening. So it's going to be something that we are looking for a little bit more clarity on, and we'll certainly provide more information as we get that, because that's something that me as a parent, even I'm trying to figure out exactly what I do. So I know that everybody's in that same boat. Okay. Do you have anything else here, folks? Or did I manage to make it through? All right. I'll give another maybe 15 seconds to see if anybody else has any last thing. And whether or not you've brought it up here tonight, or if you think of something after, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I know that this is a different time. I will ask for patience. I'm trying to get stuff together as quickly as I can, but normally we have, just to give you an idea, I normally have our ice allocation sometime in June. I got it tonight and we're on the ice in 2 weeks. So we'll figure it out as quickly as we can and we'll get it out there, but we're going to get through it. All right. I think we are good for tonight. So again, if anybody has anything that comes up, especially around the safety side of things, as we talked about earlier, that is going to be a big focus. And I know that not being able to be inside the facility is not something that is the most comforting, but we are going to do everything that we possibly can to get everybody that's inside the facility all of the information they need. And we will continue to communicate as much as we possibly can so again, you normally get 1,000 emails from me, you're probably going to get 2,000. So I apologize in advance for that, but I think this year is something that it's going to be really critical to do. And okay, one last one and then I'll close. Who will be scheduling games when we're allowed to play? It's Pacific Coast. That's an easy one. So on that note, if you do come up with something, let me know. I will be posting the video of this, as well as I'll be working on a little bit of an FAQ sheet out of all of this for those people that weren't part of it. I won't make them have to listen to it all, but we'll just continue to add to that FAQ. So we'll keep giving you guys all the information we do whenever we can. And we'll absolutely get through this and get back on the ice and have a lot of fun for those kids, which after this, what the summer has been, a little bit of fun coming up in the fall is definitely something that's ordered. So thank you everybody for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of your evening and we will be in touch soon.